And we are live, a football discussion number 4. And I am so very excited to be joined by Bo Brock from PHNX Cardinals podcast. This is pretty insane. I've been watching Bo for quite some time, especially over the Cardinals head coaching search. So I'm really honored that you're joining me today.
Glad to join you, man. Glad to talk some Cardinals football, help you out any way I can, man. We really appreciate you tuning in, watching that mess of a coaching search, and thank God that's over.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so we're going to be jumping in. We're going to be talking a bit of draft preview today. I've got a couple of other things at the end, some more just kind of Cardinals related questions. But I think we just got to quickly start with maybe not breaking news, but a bit of, the Cardinals uploaded to their social media today a video in Surrey Desert of a silver box with a Cardinals logo on it. And we're presuming that is what will be the new jerseys will be inside. I'm pretty excited about it. I've only ever watched the Cardinals with the current jerseys on, so I'm excited to see what a new one would look like. It's pretty mad.
There's been so many generations that have only seen one uniform. It's been far too long. So it's just like any change, I think people will accept as good change. I don't know what those uniforms look like inside that box. We've been speculating on it for so long, Michael. So it seems like it's coming. It's finally here, and the Arizona Cardinals are going to have a new look. So it's like new head coach, new general manager in front office, lots of changes around the organization, and new uniforms. And then it's like this team still can't get out of its own way. But look, there's a lot of things that this fan base has been pounding the table for, and they're finally getting them in that new uniform. It's gonna be a great day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's something that's like quite important. I think that's something that obviously a lot of fans I've seen been clamoring kind of ever since I've been following the team. Really, I think my hot take is I don't think the current ones are that bad, but I'm definitely excited to see to see what a new kind of what I think this is a new era. It kind of needs to freshen up. The whole Steve Keim, Cliff Kingsbury thing. It
Yeah,
ended badly, and I think those jerseys are kind of like tainted in a way now.
exactly,
We need
exactly.
something
I
new.
out with the old, in with the new. But I think the jerseys are like kind of like a microcosm of this organization and where they've kind of gone wrong, right? It's like they're not horrible, right? I was indifferent on the jerseys for so long too,
Yeah.
but it's just like at some point, like you have to keep on making adjustments, and it's like this organization, it just seems like they will settle and accept the bare minimum in some areas of the franchise, and it's like, nah, this is the NFL. Like everything should be top notch from your facilities to your wherever guys get treatment, to your uniforms, to your coaching staff, your whatever, your front office, how they should approach scouting players. Like everything needs to be fluid, and obviously it's important to have a direction. And when it comes to uniforms, it's important to have some sort of like history to it, and it's good to have that, but also you got to keep things up to date, and you got to keep things modern. You got to keep up with the NFL Joneses. And the Arizona Cardinals, with their uniforms and so many other areas, they've kind of just let them fall by the wayside far too long. So this is a refreshing look at this organization willing to make some changes, regardless if it's reluctantly or whether they're embracing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it had to happen, and I'm glad that it did. I think we're going to be moving on to some draft talk. Obviously, the tagline I had for this episode, if you guys have seen the poster over on my Instagram at a football discussion, is are we sticking and picking? Are we going to trade down? I think, Bo, I'm going to ask you the question first. What do you think the Cardinals will do? Are they sticking and picking?
I don't think they're sticking and picking. There's one player that you can really kind of identify as the guy that if they do, that they would select, right? That they would put the card in for, and you would hear Roger Goodell say, the Cardinals select third overall Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama. But like Will Anderson, if you put him on the Arizona Cardinals team tomorrow, he's a really, really good player, and he was very productive at Alabama, and he's got everything you want from a defensive player in this draft. But are the Cardinals a Will Anderson Jr. away? And I think that the easy answer is no, that this team is facing and staring down and beginning a full rebuild outside of their franchise quarterback and Kyler Murray. I think that everybody is expendable. And you could probably say probably not Buda Baker, but everybody else, is better be playing for their job in 2024. So I think what the new general manager Monty Ossenfort can do is, when he first got this job, is identify what his top assets are, how he can create more assets to maybe kickstart this thing, so it's not, a move the chains rebuild. It's okay, how can we maybe expedite this thing a little bit? So Will Anderson, or the third overall pick, when you've got these quarterback hungry teams and you've got, three guys that are in the discussion to be the top quarterback, it works out pretty well for the Arizona Cardinals to create more assets from their few assets that they had to start with post the former general manager Steve Keim's tenure. So I think the third overall pick is going to be made by another team, and the Arizona Cardinals are going to be down the line picking, once probably in the first round this year, have an extra first rounder next year, and whatever haul they get for future, a couple later round picks. So I think that the Cardinals end up trading down, getting a haul of picks, and being able to make multiple selections, more picks. They've got 8 draft picks now. They'll probably be well over 10 by the time the draft starts, April 27th.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've actually got another question just quickly related to sticking picking. Let's say that they do decide to do that. There's not a team that comes up, or the Texans. I don't believe this, but there's some misinformation out there possibly that they're not going to take a QB, and that kind of screws the Cardinals into having to make that pick. I've been doing my big board recently, and obviously I kind of moved Jalen Carter down to 5 just because of some of the off-field stuff and things.
Yeah.
But I think that he's possibly just on pure talent, he's the best player in this class, in my opinion anyway.
No doubt. No doubt
that there's any scenario where that they would consider taking him 3rd overall, or just consider taking him in a trade down spot?
It's really tough because I think that I know not all top 10 picks are the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's more value for 1 and 2 and 3. And then if you're sitting at 7, do you trade down with the Raiders? Does it become more acceptable? Are you willing to accept the flaws of a prospect, or in this case of Jalen Carter, his red flags? And I still think that his red flags are severe enough for an organization, especially when it's got the accusations that have been levied against them in the last week about, characters from the owner to people within those walls having issues just being good people, to select with a top 10 pick, or even on the outside, just your first pick of the new era, a guy who was tied to a tragedy and wasn't, forthcoming about his role. I think it's a deal breaker, unfortunately, despite what you see on tape, because I completely agree with you, Michael. I mean, I think that he is by far the best defensive player in this draft. And then you've got a close second in Will Anderson Jr., and then there's a little bit of a fall off there. So I just think that Carter, it's somebody that if you're able to trade down and recoup a second first round pick, maybe you can start to revisit a Jalen Carter. Or, it comes down to, what Monty Ossenfort, the new GM, and head coach Jonathan Gannon are willing to deal with optics wise with how they start things. And you better be generational if you're going to take that chance. And I just don't know if you can answer that question at this point in the process. And so I would just say he's not I don't think that they would touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'm a bit like, obviously with what happened, I think that makes total sense. I'm very sad. Just as a prospect, he's so good. But obviously, I think you're right, especially when in Monty Ossenfort's first press conference, I watched it in my dorm room, and he was saying, look, we don't want any egos on this team. We want everyone to be going for the team. And I think that kind of distraction, you want someone that's going to set the tone as the first pick. There's a real team leader. They're a captain. They can turn into a Buda Baker or a Zaven or someone on this defense, or a leader on the offensive side of the ball, like a James Conner, or like a Kyler Murray, and he'll continue to be. So I think that as much as that, I just thought I'd ask, you never know. I've got a couple of, obviously I think it's looking like the Cardinals are going to trade down. I've got a couple of trading down scenarios here that I've made. I've got 4. I've got us moving down with obviously this is all different scenarios. So I've got, obviously there's one where we trade down to 4 for the Colts, trade down to 7th with Raiders, trade down to 11th with the Titans. And I went a bit outlandish with the fourth one because I've not seen a lot of people say that they would move up for a QB, but the Buccaneers are kind of in the market for one. And, is there more to get there? So I think we'll start off with my Colts selection. I've got the Colts trading down, and obviously this would kind of be that in my surmise, the Raiders are coming in, maybe the Falcons or the Lions. Like a lot of teams are coming up, and the Cardinals, we're on the phone to Jim Irsay. We're like, listen, these teams are coming up. And so the Colts kind of panics. I mean, kind of everything they seem to do is a bit panicky. So, we've got that.
Right.
And they're going to trade us, obviously, 4th overall and 79th overall pick to move up, and that we're going to select Will Anderson Jr. Kind of, do you think that's a realistic scenario? And do you think that's kind of the best move the Cardinals could make? Or kind of what would your happiness be if that move's made?
It'd be fine, right? 79th overall, that's a 3rd round pick. It's decent, right? But I think that you can get a better haul. Sure, you might concede getting a Will Anderson Jr., but do you get more assets to start this rebuild with? I would say I'd go for the 35th overall pick over that 3rd overall or that 3rd round pick, and really start the conversation there, because we're talking, they get the quarterback tax in there, right? They're moving up to solidify grabbing their guy, whether it be Levis or Stroud or Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson. So you got to tie a little bit of a tax to it, and it's a little bit steeper than that. So I would hold off on that, but it's nice that at the end of the day, if it's nobody's willing to pay what you want them to move up, and you can make the trade and move one spot down and still get an asset, then do it. I think that's the worst case scenario for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Yeah. I think I was kind of, I think since I've looked at more of the prospects of it, as I was kind of earlier, I didn't want to look at all the prospects until the season was over, because I was like, I know we're not making the playoffs or anything, but I wanted to kind of just, I don't know, finish out the season before I looked at everyone. And I think that I kind of thought that was the best move at the time. But so now I've got us moving down to 7th with the Raiders. Obviously, I have us receiving, Cardinals receiving the 7th overall pick, the 38th overall pick, and a 1st round pick next year. And, I'm kind of thinking that's more of a kind of Christian Gonzalez, maybe a Witherspoon, although I think that he's kind of got the Lions written all over him now, especially since they just traded away Jeffrey Okudah. I think that's such a good kind of mix right there. He's that Dan Campbell player, like through and through. So, Tyree Wilson, obviously we know that they're having him in for a top 30 meeting. So, you've kind of they seem to be quite big fans of him. So I think those could be, what are your thoughts on that scenario? That were to play out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's probably a little bit more appealing, just because you get into the 2nd round, right? In your deal here and the deal you had with the Colts, and this one gets you another, top 50 pick. So you have a chance to get a premium position player at cornerback, whether depending on what Detroit does. Because I agree with you, they sent Okudah, former 3rd overall pick, out of town. They've got a glaring hole at cornerback, and they've got a deep class. They just have to decide probably which one they want to take first off the board, and who's going to be, if you're using last year's as a comp, like Sauce Gardner to Derek Stingley, those are good players to have, but Sauce was the guy, right? So if they take Christian Gonzalez and you're left with like Devin Witherspoon, I think that's a premium, whatever cornerback's left.
Yeah,
that's great for the Cardinals to start with. And then it's a deep edge class. So you've got 34th overall pick, and then you've got the Raiders 2nd round pick at 38. You can start to look at that front 7, right? And the Cardinals need a lot of help in the front 7. They need a lot of help on the offensive line. Having those picks in those general vicinities, 34, 38, I think that you can start to do some work on that. So yeah, I do like that a lot.
Okay. I'm moving on. Obviously, our next deal is with the Titans. We'd be receiving the 11th overall pick, the 41st overall pick, the their first round pick in 2024, and their 2nd round pick in 2025. Now, I have actually nabbed this from the Mel Kiper Jr. Draft a couple of days ago. I really like it. And I think obviously in that kind of range, you're looking at a Peter Skoronski, a Joey Porter, and I've got a couple here, 2 players that I really like. Maybe it's slightly early for their range, but possibly a Nolan Smith or a Darnell Wright. I like both of them as prospects. I just think that maybe there's not a team kind of, maybe they're more of a like middle teens round. But I don't know. The Patriots probably aren't going to move up teams like that. They're in that position. So, what do you think about possibly taking a risk on them at 11?
I think the Tennessee Titans are the most intriguing because they are on the outside of the top 10 looking in. And you have the ability to really kind of like press them and say, hey, you want to move that far up. You want to jump and hurdle these other teams that you fear are in front of you from keeping you from getting your player. You got to pay the tax, right? And, Mel Kiper's, that mock draft with those trades, it's a banger, right? It's fun. It's fun to think about. And the players that they ended up selecting, still getting a guy like Tyree Wilson, the Texas Tech edge rusher at 11, and then getting the intriguing wide receiver out of TCU and Quentin Johnston, and then adding the big Michigan defensive lineman with the next pick that Tennessee gave you.
I believe I saw they're going to meet with him as well, Muzzy Smith.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's I think that's probably a home run, right? Because you get to maximize the assets that are coming your way, and you're still within striking distance to getting a player. Sure, you don't have it's not as big of a slam dunk, like a lot lower floor, but maybe just as high of a ceiling as a Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. You get a guy like Tyree Wilson, who's a freak, right? He's got the long wingspan. Yeah. He's got just the size you want. He probably fits your defensive scheme a little bit better if you're Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rollis. So I think I would love that. I think that's the kind of the dream scenario. As long as they're doing their due diligence, and I'm sure they are, from what JG's told us, Monty Ossenfort, just guy watches film all the time. And I'm sure he's going to put in the work as far as who the best player he can get at 11 is. So yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Monty just screams such a football guy to me. Like, 24/7, he's working. I love it.
All right, let's get crazy with this. I need to hear this one. With Tampa. Let's hear it.
With the Buccaneers, this is quite a big deal. So obviously we're going to be picking up number 19 overall, number 50, a 2024 first round pick, 2025 first round pick, and a 2025 third round pick as well. And I kind of thought in that range, you could be looking at like a Will McDonald out of Iowa State, possibly a Brian Barisi out of Clemson. Obviously, he was really highly recruited out of high school. Is he kind of that D-line piece? Or possibly if like Nolan Smith falls again, he could be in that range. Would you kind of think of that as something that's kind of not been in the media, but I think as an outside possibility of happening?
For sure. I think you've got some wild cards there that certainly some team could fall in love with, depending on how the quarterback dominoes fall. But maybe there's a team already in love with Anthony Richardson and thinks if they can get as high as 3, they'll be there. It's tough because, like, as we start breaking this down, you can kind of start to tier them up yourself, right? So you've got like the Will Anderson tier. You've got like the middle of the top 10 tier, like your Christian Gonzalez's, maybe Tyree Wilson, and you got that next tier, right? And you start to get there where it's like you don't know enough as far as how these guys' games will translate to the NFL, like a Brian Barisi or especially with Nolan Smith, right? He blew it up as far as the combine went. He put up absurd numbers, sub 4.40, an absurd, vertical. But he's a tweener, right? He's like barely 6'2". He's just over 230. Where's he going to play? He's a little bit undersized, but hell, he was productive at Georgia. He's a 2-time national champion. He was a big piece of that team, but is it going to translate to the next level? I'm sure you can find the spot, but then you kind of get into the same kind of trouble that you did a couple of years ago, taking guys like Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins. It's like where you love their versatility, right? You love their athleticism, but how are you going to tap into it, and how are they going to become down-to-down productive NFL players? And I think they're still trying to figure that out. Like Isaiah Simmons with the 8th overall pick, national championship Clemson player, super productive, but he's just about the same size. He's 6'4". He's just under 240 with all the speed to burn. But like, where does he excel down in and down out? I think that you'd probably struggle that with Nolan Smith. I'm not saying he's not going to be a productive NFL player, but I think there's just more questions that are raised with those prospects. And I think I think the Cardinals have the luxury of staying within striking distance of those type of prospects where they're more can't miss than having to kind of murky up the waters a little bit, but still get a really good haul, right? And I think that you can kind of find a happy medium there where you can get the best of both worlds, a prospect that you can be an impact maker early, and then also get some future assets like you have there with some future first round picks and future draft capital.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's, I think kind of talking through these, I think I'm kind of more and more falling in love with possibly that Titans deal. It kind of just, it looks good. Obviously, they need someone.
Titans or Raiders, I think 7, anywhere between 7 and 11. I think that you can drive the price up, get a haul, and also still get a really, really good player.
Definitely, especially because, you kind of see, and Anthony Richardson fits. So, I think he's going to be the QB that's there at 3. I mean, unless something kind of off the wall happens. And I think that Anthony Richardson fits both of those schemes quite well, kind of the Raiders and the Titans. And I think he's done the Cardinals a real solid, performing so well at all of his pro days and, measuring so well and everything. He's kind of, in terms of his speed and athleticism and everything, he's kind of that prospect that, maybe he didn't perform, as well in college, but he's got everything, he's got all the tools that you need to be a star in this league. So, I really think he's up for it. I think we're kind of going to be moving into some more just kind of Cardinals talk. Obviously, maybe talk, I think just kind of more, maybe not so drafty, but kind of going into some DeAndre Hopkins talk, things like that. What do you think is going to happen?
Okay.
I kind of want to start off, obviously with D-Hop, kind of where, do you think he gets moved in the draft? Because the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm seeing, I personally think, is he just going to kind of be on the roster next year? It's kind of looking like nothing's really moving.
Right. Yeah. His market, I don't think anybody really anticipated it kind of dying like it did, or just never materializing. Right. I mean, they saw, the type of player that he used to be. And, there seems to be a steep decline for NFL, especially wide receivers, when they reach over the age of 30. And you look at all the variables that you have to deal with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. It makes sense why teams are kind of monitoring it, but there's really nothing materializing as far as a deal. So, talk to a lot of people in the know as far as, what they think is going to happen. And it seems like, Monty's kind of set on what his asking price is, and then people want him to come off of that significantly. So it's just the negotiation process. And, a first-year GM has the ability and the luxury of being patient, because, what's the worst thing to happen is if he stays on the roster and you just wait it out, and then a team, suffers an injury or whatever, and they're lacking a playmaker, or they see, it's different what your needs are in April than what they are in September, October, November, December. So I think that, he's being smart and seeing if something could pop up, and D-Hop's value could go back up, because right now I think it's kind of at a stalemate, right? You're trying to figure out who's gonna budge on it, but you see what happens when patience pays off, like Odell Beckham Jr. getting $15 million. I know it involves some void years, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take some creativity, right? How do you get out of, because no team really can realistically take on his cap number. So, it's anywhere from 19 to 22 million that the team would have to take on. So the Arizona Cardinals have to get creative, and it's the same thing with the 3rd overall pick. It's like you try to just maximize what assets you get in return, because that's the most valuable currency to a rebuilding team, is draft capital, future draft capital. So they're just going to try to do that. It's absurd to me to hear people say that they would just outright release them. They would take whatever, but they're trying to, finagle their way back into a solid, day 2 pick. And we'll see. It might be early day 3, but that at this point, I think some people would take that, because you have to be realistic about what's going to happen. Does DeAndre Hopkins want to play for a rebuilding team? Does a rebuilding team have the luxury of paying a top wide receiver, especially in his 30s? There's just no business-wise anything that makes sense for this marriage to continue. They didn't find an amicable divorce that would benefit both sides. So I think that's where it's going. It's just taking a lot longer than anybody anticipated.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that, I think when we saw the stuff with him being outright cut, I think there's kind of, I was pretty shocked about that. I can't see that happen in person. I mean,
right.
Surely you'd get something. Do you think there's kind of any chance that he could be involved in a draft day trade, possibly something like that, just to kind of for optics, so it kind of looks like you've got more in return, maybe, something like
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the wide receivers, one that are available now, I think DeAndre Hopkins, as far as caliber of player, it's not even close any longer. You saw some similar comps go. Beckham Jr. You got Brandon Cooks, and I think D Hop, as far as what he does on game day, is far more valuable than any of those teams. And then you've got kind of a light wide receiver class where it's like you get the kid out of Ohio State, Jigba
Yeah.
Smith. You've got Zay Flowers out of Boston College, and then you got Quentin Johnston. Like, you might have one round one wide receiver, but as soon as those other ones go off the board, and it could be a run early in the second round at the latest, then you'll have some teams say, "Oh well, crap, we missed out on getting one of those guys." So maybe they pick up the phone and call Monty, early day 2, and they can get a late second or early third or late third. I think that that's very realistic for sure. I mean, it just starts to throw in more leverage the Cardinals' way once wide receivers continue to leave the market, the available market.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that could very well be, like you're saying, that only Jackson Smith and Jigba is picked in the first round, especially like I saw Jim Nagy on Twitter the other day, who's the executive director of the Senior Bowl, saying that the NFL isn't as high on the receiver class as maybe like a lot of the media are. A lot of people are, that they're saying that Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's the only player that a lot of teams have got a first round grade on. So I think that there's a high chance that a lot of those receivers make it into day 2, and that there could be a real run. So I think I'm going to move on to something else as well. Another Clemson Arizona Cardinals star, Isaiah Simmons, 5th-year option, picked up, is it not? I've got quite a strong opinion that it should be picked up, but I want to hear your thoughts first before I go.
Yeah, it's when we probably view him similarly as far as what type of player he can be, right? And you see all the tools, you see the athleticism, you've seen the game-changing plays that he's made. He made, I want to say, 4 to 5 game-changing plays last year for a 4-13 team. I mean, he won the game in Vegas, stripped his former teammate from Clemson, Hunter Renfrow, and Byron Murphy scooped it up and took it to the house for game-winning touchdown. He made a strip sack of Kirk Cousins. He had the pick against the Saints on Thursday Night Football. He has the ability to do it, but when you look at what his 5th-year option is going to cost, it's going to be over $12 million. And you look at where Monty Ossenfort comes from what his teams traditionally invest in the linebacker position, what Jonathan Gannon had invested in the linebacker position at some of his stops. They don't pay that much money. And when this new regime, the one that didn't pick him 8th overall, doesn't have that pressure of turning him into the player that, Keim needed him to be a couple of years ago, select him in that first round of that 2020 draft. I think that Gannon and Monty Ossenfort need to, even though it seems like, 12 million is not that much for a guy that has the potential Isaiah has. It's just from a business sense, like, why invest in that position that you traditionally don't, where you feel like you can draft a guy late or get an undrafted free agent like the guy that Gannon develops for the Eagles, who was their top tackler, and TJ Edwards, who just got the bag this offseason. It just doesn't. There's just not a paper trail that would point to Monty Ossenfort or Jonathan Gannon going and saying, "Hey, that's a slam dunk. Sign off on it now. Get him locked in for year 5." I think that they want him to be a good player. He wasn't at the workouts, that started this week.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there is, there's just this. I don't get the sense that there's this like camaraderie or want to either side to move beyond this upcoming season.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a shame to me personally. I mean, I kind of, obviously I know Isaiah Simmons, he's going to want to get his money, and that's, perfectly fine. I think, all the points that you're saying about the linebacker position, how it's been devalued, and how kind of, what Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort see that position as, and what kind of capital they're going to put into it. It makes sense. It also makes sense considering Zaven had a breakout year last year, and, you're going to have to pay him in a couple of years' time. Like, investing in 2 linebackers is like, dicey enough kind of investment in one. So I think, but I just think the talent that I think just kind of seeing the game-changing plays that he makes. I think I'd still love to see him on the team, and I think there's something, I don't know, there's something I've got a soft spot for him. I think he's a really, really solid player, and I think that I know the
I
price is a
agree
bit
with you, man.
high, but
You see him and you're like, man, this guy's like 6'4", 240, runs as fast as he does. You're like, he's got to be one of the greatest football players in the world. And then you see
yeah,
it and it just doesn't translate. And if the risk you take, right? And it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially if Jonathan Gannon and new defensive coordinator Nick Rallis can to figure out how to utilize them and kind of deploy them correctly. That by declining his fifth-year option, which the deadline is May 2nd, that it's pretty much he's in a contract year, and there's a very good chance that if he has a really good year, he walks. But I think that's a good problem to have. Like if he has a solid year, one, it means that coaching staff, they know how to develop guys, right? And there might be like Isaiah Simmons identifying that, like, hey, these guys, they taught me how to finally find my way at the NFL level. Or he's like, oh, I'm going to go get as much money as possible and screw this organization and then pick them up. But look, I mean, I think it still becomes a decent problem to have, and if not, like, you can invest that money elsewhere, and have the ability to draft, develop, or bring in guys in free agency for low money and play the position at the level that they want.
Sure, yeah. I mean, especially since we've seen them, bring in a few linebackers during this free agency, kind of like Chris Barnes and Josh Woods, on a kind of more like minimum deal. So, yeah, that just makes sense.
Because you're white, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, as well. Yeah, I just got to mention that the Cardinals are beaten with Tank Bigsby. I had to get that in the podcast. What a name!
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, it's an all draft name, right? Tank Bigsby out of Auburn. And he runs like his name, right? I mean, he's kind of a bruiser, kind of a 4.5 guy, 40. But you like him. He's kind of an early down back, where you could see, the tenure of James Conner, as good of a Cardinal as he's been. There's not a long shelf life for running back, so why not? I think it's long overdue that the Cardinals draft. Use a decent draft pick. I'm not saying first round, probably not second round, on a running back. And a guy like Tank Bigsby, love it. Give me the jersey. Give me the new Cardinals jersey of Tank Bigsby. I'd love it.
Yes, that's what I'm after. Okay, now one final thing. This could be a bit of an anticlimactic question, but obviously we're called the football discussion over here, and that is, of course, American football. However, we're also talking football, English, soccer in America. Are you at all into football?
Am I into soccer?
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten into the TV versions of it. Like, I've gotten into Ted Lasso. I've gotten into Welcome to Wrexham and learned about a couple of the clubs over there. And then obviously when the World Cup rolls around, I mean, it's fascinating to me. It's like the transfer rules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Any of like the front office things and the wheeling and dealing and player movement, I can get on board with all that. And then you get into the strategy of the game. I mean, when it's on, I'll watch it. But as far as getting up early here in the States and watching it like a lot of the crazy people, the hooligans over here do, not so much. I would never say I'm one of those guys.
Fair enough. Hey, we've got a passing interest. I like it. Yeah, I've got to do that. Every time I have someone English on, I always ask them about the NFL as well. So, nice to have that synergy. So, yeah,
Who's your club? Who's your soccer club?
I support Spurs. Tottenham Hotspur. They're like local to me. My mum grew up like literally 5 minutes from the stadium. So
I got to go to the MLS All-Star game in Denver like 5 years ago, and was the team that was playing. So, I mean, I think it was like their B squad. I don't think we saw anybody that was a star on that team, but it was still fun to watch.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I actually went to MLS. I went to New York it might be like 5 years ago now, but I went. It was Red Bulls versus New York City. It was like a bit of a derby, so that was good fun.
Nice.
Yeah, perfect. Anyway, that is all we've got time for today. It's been a real pleasure, man. This has been such good fun. and I've really enjoyed filming this. I will let you plug all the PHNX stuff now because they're amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, man. It's been great talking to you. Come on anytime you want to talk some ball.
Perfect.
PHNX. Yeah. PHNX Cardinals, PHNX _ Cardinals on social media, Instagram, Twitter. You can follow me, Brack, BOBRACK on Twitter. Just tweeting out Cardinals information almost ad nauseum, but lot of things to look forward to. Tune into on our YouTube page, of course, PHNX _sports, and then we got a draft show going on April 27th. It's going to be live coverage, full first round, full second and third round, and then we'll recap things on that Saturday. So if you love football, you love the draft, that's going to be right in your wheelhouse. So I appreciate anybody who tunes in or listens wherever they find podcasts.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That will all be linked in the description, as well as our Instagram at AFootballDiscussion and our Twitter at AFooty_discuss. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and peace.